When people think about communication, they assume that the most thing that we need to focus on is our speaking. And those speaking skills are important in a communication. It's not the only thing that we need to highlight. We need to highlight, in fact, our listening skills. How we listen impacts how we communicate. And though we may have a series of things that we look through the world with, we need to worry more about whether or not we're listening carefully to the person speaking.
How about communication? What does it mean to you?
I mean, we hear this a lot, right? We hear the concept, communication skills. You need to fix your communication.
Yeah.
This is something we hear a lot, but then I think people are like, what about communication?
Yeah.
But I think what it means is, how do you speak to another person, but also how do you listen? So I think communication, the core of it is listening.
Not to speak.
Not to speak.
That's why they say, silence is from gold.
Yeah, silence is made of gold. And my favorite one, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Right, absolutely.
So we're supposed to listen twice as much as we speak.
So are we good listeners?
I would have to ask in terms of, depends, I think it depends. When you speak to others, how much do you actually absorb? How much are you paying attention to? I think you'll know if you're a good listener if you're the one doing the listening.
Right, so not talking.
Not talking, but
Right.
waiting for them to actually finish what they have to say.
Right. Because sometimes, as a salesperson, you're supposed to, present your product and present your stuff. So you're supposed to talk a lot. And I learned somewhere that, if they are listening, they are not listening.
Interesting.
Meaning, like, if they are quiet and you're talking, that means you're talking too much.
Exactly.
And they are somewhere else. They
Precisely.
left the attention of attention
Correct.
goes, and they go, daydreaming and stuff, and you're talking and you think they are listening, but they are not really listening.
No, absolutely. And interesting that you brought up sales, because I think this is the biggest misconception, that
Yes.
you feel like you have to be on the go,
Yeah,
consistently
talkative,
speaking and
yeah.
talkative. Pitch the product, push for it, pressure
Absolutely.
them, get the sale, close.
Yes.
But what if you were to take the time to listen to what your audience needed and then use that?
Right. And then actually you make the pitch or the presentation for them, not for you, addressing their pain point or addressing their needs rather than you pushing the product. It becomes more attractive that way. So I feel like when you want to communicate, you have to have a sort of intention. What's the purpose of your communication? What is the ultimate goal? I mean,
Yes.
when you are communicating. So we sometimes communicate because we want to say what we feel or what we think of without looking at the person who is listening, if they are listening or not. Maybe they are not interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have to be aware, right? We have to be really aware and putting the attention on the listener rather than what I have to say.
Exactly. So the focus should be on the other person.
The receiver.
I think when people think, okay, I need to work on my listening, I need to work on my speaking, I need to have my intention set, and then they'll overthink it.
Right.
But when we talk about listening, how do we actually teach people how to listen? And I don't mean just listen to hear the words and repeat it, but to
No.
really listen.
Active listening.
Active listening.
Yeah. I don't think in school they taught us listening.
No.
They taught us how to write, they taught us how to read, but listening was not one of them. Maybe in some comprehension classes.
I think they taught us listening by telling us to be quiet,
Yes.
but we were not
Listen.
paying attention. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think about this a lot, and one of the things that I discovered was just people have filters.
Right.
When they listen, when they look at the world, when they have a certain perspective, they look around through a layer of filters, layer upon layer.
They have their own lens. kind of thing.
Exactly. And each filter, I would say, represents a part of them. So
Maybe the principle, maybe their
Principles,
values, their
values.
belief system. and
absolutely, beliefs, biases,
stuff. Yeah, biases. Yes.
experiences, childhood, memories, work, family, so many filters.
Absolutely.
So sometimes when we listen, we see things only through our filters, but we're not listening to what the person's trying to say.
We all communicate. Children, they communicate. Adults, they communicate. Communication is all around us. And you can learn how to communicate by learning the model of the communication, by knowing what is your purpose of communication. We don't communicate for the sake of communication. No, we have intention. So know your intention, know your purpose, and understand your audience so you can flex your style and the structure so you can really get the message concise and clear to your audience. Easily, we can lose ourselves in our thoughts. And when somebody is communicating with us, we are going somewhere else with our thoughts. We are not really paying attention. The core of the communication is to listen actively, not to pretend to listen, to really genuinely listen. And once you understand, you have a chance to give feedback or to give your remarks or to reflect on what's being said. In that way, only then the other person understand that you understood them and the message is received very clearly. So basically, what I hear you saying is to really listen genuinely and be there, alert in the moment. Of course, with body language, eye contact, facing the person, leaning forward. That shows that you are listening and you're interested on what has been to say. I learned from a friend of mine who had a book that says, you know, when you listen actively, you will become like a magnet. Really,
Yes.
I like that. It's a nice booklet. It's in Arabic though, but basically, so, and I see that when, let's say, I give you an example, I'm rushing into a meeting and I receive a phone call. I look at the caller ID, and if this person who's calling me is a good listener, I immediately answer. Because usually they would say, excuse me, Hamza, you have time? I want to talk to you about this. And they give you the space to reply and to say, no, I'm entering the meeting, maybe I'll call you later. The other people that they don't listen,
Yes.
once you answer, they start talking.
Correct.
And you are like, but I want, yeah, they're not.
Yeah, and even when you tell them I'm in a meeting right now,
They
I'm
continue.
busy, they'll say yes, let me just finish, and they continue, and this shows that this is not listening.
Absolutely.
There are many factors we need to think about when we are working on our communication skills. Yes, speaking is part of it, but it is not the entire thing. Now, a lot of us forget that listening is involved. And the thing is, what's interesting, as we mentioned in the episode, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We take that for granted, that we are actually created in such a way where we should be able to respect and uphold how we should communicate with others. Now remember, when we are communicating with others, we are actually building and fostering relationships, whether that be professional, whether that be in our families or with our friends. And to be able to do so in such a way that grants you success, you need to be able to listen more than you speak. And when it comes to listening, it's not as easy as it sounds. We think that when we hear, we are listening. Hearing is not the same as listening, because hearing, you can hear sounds. You can hear the birds chirping, you can hear the roads, you can hear the sounds of everyday life. But when you are listening, you are going deeper. You are actually paying attention to what that person is trying to say. You are paying attention to their mood, you're paying attention to their thoughts, you're even paying attention to their perspective. You're listening not only to the words, you're also listening by paying attention to their body language. So this goes into a deep listening process. And only when you practice these skills will you start to see a difference in how people respond to you when you are communicating. So remember, the focus is not to be the best person speaking or the only person in the room that people want to listen to. It's being the last person to speak.
So what do you think of the verbal, non-verbal communication? What's the difference and what's important?
When you think of those things, right, when we're looking at the verbal and nonverbal communication, you mentioned quite a few in terms of the nonverbal, which is body language, eye contact, how a person sits, the proximity. They do affect communication,
Right.
because most of the time people will process what they see before what they hear,
Right.
especially if it's happening at the same time.
Or before even they internalize it in their brain.
Absolutely.
So the sight is faster than the brain operation.
Exactly. And this literally goes back and affects your listening skills.
Of course.
So
and the filter.
The filters, precisely. So now, once you recognize, let's say once you recognize the first element, which is your filters, what do you do about it?
Yeah, the filter is like, I would look at it as if it's like, being open-minded to different beliefs, to different way of talking and so on, to just without judgment. So you take whatever is said as is, without, for example, deleting some of the things that has been said, or sometimes we generalize things.
Yes.
Like I always use the example with my students. I tell them my friend Ali Imran married his sister. And all the faces will be like, what? Sister? Okay, sister. And really, the feedback I get from them, from just talking about the statement, one would say, oh, maybe sister in law or something, or some other words,
Exactly.
sister in
Yeah.
life or sister in,
Precisely, or work, or
yeah,
like
yeah,
they try
yeah,
to rationalize.
right, to make it fit their filter.
Exactly.
Then I tell them, okay, of course, Ali didn't marry his sister, but he married his first cousin.
Okay.
Now, when you go in a different context in Europe, for example, if I say I married my cousin, they would look at it in the same way we look at the person who married his sister here.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
100%.
always the context plays a big role there, right?
Yeah.
And knowing how people, especially with body language and stuff, sometimes we do things out of our culture. It's acceptable, but when you do it somewhere else, they see it in a different way.
Precisely. And it goes back to this part, that context, trying to take things into context
Yes.
without putting yours onto it. You give the person space, like you mentioned, the space to speak, the space to fully say their piece before you try to interact. Now, a lot of times we hear this saying, people speak to respond, or
Yeah.
people listen to respond,
Yes.
and not to listen, not to understand,
Or listen to react.
or listen to react.
Yeah. I'm very much interested in the filter because the filter plays a big role on our listening
100%.
habits and so on. So, for example, I read somewhere that we receive information like 2 million bits per second
Oh, wow.
using our five sensory factors,
Absolutely.
and hearing and
Yeah.
and tasting and so on. So, and our brain only process 200 bits for information per second.
Interesting.
Yes. So most of the information that we receive, as we said, we either generalize or delete some of the things and receive this. So, and the interesting part is when you tell somebody a story, 5-minute story, and they tell it to someone else, and that someone else tell it to
Correct.
someone different, and after 5 or 6 people, the story, like, for example, I told them the story they got married, and then they will have a story that they got divorced. From where?
Yeah. So it's like
Why
the
is
game,
that?
broken telephone.
Right, exactly.
When you try to, pass news on,
Right.
because of each person's filter, they will deliver it in their way, in
Yeah.
their context, their understanding.
Absolutely.
So I think the biggest, I remember hearing a really amazing TED Talk speaker talk about listening and how to actually build it into your routine. And she says to follow just, like a few standards. And the biggest one, firstly, would be listen more than you speak,
Yes.
right? Another
Because
one,
we have 2 years.
because we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And another one that I found very interesting is remember that true listening means putting aside oneself.
Yes. Yes.
So-
wow, that's deep listening, right?
Yeah, so that's deep listening, meaning I take myself, my filters, I put it to one side. Now, it's hard because when we're sharing a story or when we're speaking, it's very engaging
Yeah.
and sometimes tempting for a person to say, me too.
We tend to do that. I agree.
Yes. So what we need to do instead is to figure out how to listen properly.
We kind of seen how important communication is, and it is really the basic for every endeavor. We are a human being. We communicate with each other And to communicate in the right way, we must be good listeners. And we have to see the body language, the tonality of the voice, how it's said, and what is the reaction of our listeners, so we understand that they are listening and they are comprehending what we are saying to them. We talk to our children, we talk to our spouses, we talk to our friends in Diwaniyas, and we talk with our colleagues at work. How you communicate is really important, especially if you are managing a team.